Hey everyone, Chelsea Williams here, coming to you live from Core Solutions Group. We, of course, are helping U.S. law firms to increase profitability and get financial clarity. But this video series is more focused around bringing you relevant information that's going to help you run your law firm in an efficient and a profitable way from other professionals in the industry. So today we have with us Melanie Leonard. Melanie went into business for herself for 13 years and realized that the passion maybe just wasn't there. But what she did have a passion for was processes and optimizing those processes through the use of software. So she took the leap again after 13 years of practicing on her own, and she created Streamlined Legal, which she has been doing for about 18 months now. And I'm actually going to take a moment, and Melanie, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about what Streamlined Legal is and what you guys do and offer for lawyers.
Sure, it's my pleasure. So it's Streamlined. Our goal is to help attorneys get the most out of their practice management software and other technologies. And so what we do is we help them analyze how things get done in their office now, what kind of technology and software they have, and how to marry those two together and how to get the most out of that technology in order to grow their business, same as you.
Yes. And I think it's worth addressing also, the fact that you, after 13 years, because, that's a long time, and you had to have something, pretty well established, and to make that leap again, could not have been easy. So I want to take a moment and just ask you, tell us about that journey and how you were able to leave that being a lawyer after all of the schooling and all of the pressure to make sure that you carried out what you put into place for all these years and following your passion.
Yeah, that was not easy. It was scary. But it got to a point where I had my firm, when I started thinking about these ideas, I had my firm for about 11 years or 10 years or so. And I had come to this point where it had grown very quickly at the beginning. And then I got to this plateau where I felt like I really wasn't growing anymore. And that was frustrating for me because I really did want to grow. And so I started looking for help and resources and, what other people doing. And I found some coaching groups online. I found How to Manage a Small Law Firm, which was a coaching group that I ended up joining. And I worked with them for about 2 years in growing my business. And they look at all kinds of things. We looked at marketing. We looked at, financial controls. We looked at sales. We looked at all kinds of stuff. And it came to a point where I started thinking, the issue really isn't the law firm or the business, and which is not unusual. The issue is me. Like, I'm the owner of this business, and this is not going the way that I want. And there's things that I'm doing mostly subconsciously to, sabotage this or not make it work as well as I'd like it to. And so that was a big realization for me that took a long time. It wasn't like I just started coaching and all of a sudden I figured that out. But it was definitely something that I came to over those couple of years of being in that program, and got to a point where I thought, this is no longer serving me. This law firm isn't doing what I want or need. And so I started looking at the other things that were essentially making me excited, and helping other attorneys run their businesses was much more exciting and fulfilling to me than my own. And so I had been helping attorneys specifically with Clio because I used that in my own practice for so many years, helping them in the group. And it just got to a point where I couldn't do both. I mean, I tried to do both businesses for about 3 months, and it was not working. So I quickly decided that this was definitely something that I wanted to pursue. And I went ahead and sold my law firm and went full steam ahead with Streamlined Legal. And like I said, it was a hard and long decision, but looking back on it 18 months now, it was definitely the right decision for me. And I really feel good about the idea that as a law firm owner, I was able to help a lot of people. I mean, I did residential real estate. We closed houses all day long. And it was great. But now as somebody that's helping other firm owners, I just think of exponentially I'm able to help that many more clients because now I can help other firm owners get their offices running more smoothly, and in turn help a lot more clients. And so I really feel like I've just kind of exponentially grown the number of people that I'm able to help by making this transition and really being able to use those skills that I have and the things that really interest me to help other people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important to address passion in the work that we do, and the reality that you can really wake up most of the time, not all the time. Let's not fluff it here, but you can
Sure.
wake up most of the time and be happy to go to work and love what you do. So I really applaud you for making that transition, especially after all that time owning and establishing your own law firm. And, you know, it really speaks to the fact that it's never too late, and you're never really stuck. And even in business, one of the biggest success factors is being able to innovate and pivot and be flexible. You know, you never, as a business owner, you really never want to get to that place of complacency and being stuck. You always have to be growing and moving no matter what. So choosing to move, recognizing first of all that you're not happy where you're at, and choosing to move in a different direction that's going to you know, fulfill you and make you a little bit more happy in what you're doing, I think is really important. So thank you again for sharing that.
It's my pleasure.
So let's talk about with Streamlined Legal. So you guys work with optimizing processes supported by software. So I'm curious, tell us what you see when it comes to lawyers and software in general.
Yeah, I mean, the legal technology industry has just exploded as far as the amount of money that's being put into it, the amount of software choices, the amount of technology out there. So there's new things every day, and it's just changing like crazy. And so it can be a really overwhelming space, especially for attorneys that, you know, maybe you went to law school 10, 15, 20 years ago, and everything is different since then, you know, as far as technology goes. And so it can be overwhelming, but what I see is I see a lot of attorneys that will, you know, feel like a practice management software is going to be helpful for them. And so they'll purchase it and they'll start using it. And they do, they get benefit from it. A lot of times people will take advantage of the billing systems. It's a great place to have a shared calendar or shared contacts, and those are all great things. But I find that a lot of attorneys will buy the software, start using what they urgently needed from it, which is usually the billing, and then you know, kind of leave it at that and not always take advantage of the other features that the software has. By definition, practice management software typically includes a lot of different features. And so when I started seeing how prevalent that issue was, when I started meeting other attorneys, you know, and talking about the technology that they're using and learning about how they do things in their office, I was surprised at the extent of how little people were using the technology they had. And so I started asking questions about, you know, like, well, why? You know, what keeps you from doing it, or why don't you use this? And there's a number of different reasons, but some of the most common reasons that I find are attorneys will get really busy. Obviously, there are busy, you know, periods as far as growth or times of the year, depending on your practice area. And you get really busy, and it seems in the short term to be faster or easier to find a new solution or do something, you know, a different way. You know, maybe you want to be paperless, but at the time when you're trying to, you know, talk to your client on the phone about things, it's easier to have the paper in front of you because you can grab it quickly off your desk or whatever. You know, so there's all kinds of examples of why people think in the short term that going to the software and finding the solution and learning how to use it and implement it in your firm is not worth the time. And so that was happening a lot, or at least that's what I was seeing. And so to be able to, I feel like it's very empowering to be able to go to attorneys and talk to them about the idea that, yes, in the short term, this is going to take some more time or energy or resources, but in the long term, and maybe not even that long, I mean, we're talking like weeks or months, you know, as opposed to days. But in the longer term, it's going to save you a lot, whether it's time or money or both. or sanity. That's a big one. You know, a lot of people feel a little overwhelmed by having to keep track of all the different cases and what everyone's doing within their firm once they're hiring people and having people help them. So it can be a lot to handle and a lot to manage. And those are not the kind of things that they teach you in law school. I mean, when I went to law school, there was no option to take any type of practice management class even. Those are being offered more and more these days, but still not to the extent I think that they're necessary. So when you have 50% or more of attorneys coming out of law school and going to solo or small practices, they just aren't equipped with the tools to know how to manage a practice or to grow a business or anything like that. And so I think that being able to help people see what the software they already have in most cases can do is just very empowering and really helps them to be able to solve some of those pain points, and typically without spending a ton more money because they're already paying for the software. So it's a great opportunity we have to be able to help attorneys and give them that leg up that they need in order to tackle all the other challenges that they're dealing with at the same time.
Yes. You know, it's funny. So we get a lot of people calling who are thinking about going into practice for themselves or are
Sure.
new into practice. You know, a lot of times I'll get the response, well, this is not something that I need to do right now because we're just starting out. You know, that's something maybe I'll look at down the road. And I always tell them the same thing. I tell them, you have more time right now to lay your foundation than you will a few months down the road when you start getting busy. I promise
Right.
you. And, you know, I feel like that's something that people often overlook. And, you know, you spoke to the fact that when we look at like these softwares and we look at all of the capabilities that it has, we get overwhelmed and we're like, no, I don't want to, I'm just going to, you know, use it for what I want. We're looking for shortcuts,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we don't want to do that initial time investment. And so we kind of maybe go off and look for these Band-Aids. And I've been victim of it too. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
I've hopped into a new software and I'm looking at it and I go cross-eyed, like, I don't want to do this. Like, you know, I don't
Sure.
want to, where's my shortcut, you know?
Yeah.
And so what would you say to those people? What advice would you give them if they have that mindset of, oh, I don't have time right now to do it? And, you know, what are they missing out on? What's the sunken cost? What is the missed opportunity in putting that initial time and possibly money investment up front to optimize the software that they're using?
Yeah. And you were exactly right when you talked about, you know, what's the state of mind. I mean, it's all about your mindset, because I get it. Like when I didn't have any clients yet in my law firm, when I first started, I was hesitant to spend money on paper, much less software, you know? So, you know, I totally see where people are coming from. But it's a mindset that you just have to work on and consistently. I mean, you can't just say, well, now next week I'm going to have a different mindset. Like, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, mindset, just like any other skill or anything else that you learn, you have to constantly be working on. And I still listen to podcasts all the time of people that, you know, I'm trying to learn from, or I'm trying to, you know, accomplish things from. And it's definitely a mindset where you have to think of it as, you know, I'm building the foundation for a business. And back in the day when it used to be the foundation had to be a physical office space, and the foundation had to be, you know, equipment like typewriters and a secretary, because, you know, things were just different. So there were foundations that you had to lay back then, which are still important now. They're still important foundations. They just have changed. You know, maybe you don't need that physical office space, but maybe the money you're going to spend on the software is going to be way worth it, because you're going to be able to do your bills in about 5 minutes, as opposed to, you know, a whole day or 2 days, you know? So definitely, I think that looking at your mindset of what's important when you're first starting out, especially, and I would argue that software is right up there. You know, especially a practice management software that's going to be able to handle a vast majority of what you're going to be doing in the law firm. I mean, you don't have to look for a separate thing for calendar. You don't have to look for a separate thing for task management. You don't have to look for a separate, like, it's essentially plug and play. Like, here's the software, put your law firm in it. And so I feel like, you know, the the trick is getting into that mindset. And that's not always easy, but talk to other attorneys, see what they're doing, you know, reach out for help. I feel like a lot of times attorneys are hesitant to do that. You know, we go to law school and we get this great law license that's going to empower us to do a lot of things and build businesses and help people. And sometimes we forget about the idea that sometimes we need help. Sometimes we're the people that need help. So definitely, which is why I think communities like yours and, you know, Facebook groups and bar associations and other places where we can interact with attorneys that are trying to accomplish similar things, you know, you don't have to recreate the wheel. Go see what other people are doing and take what works and don't take what didn't work. And, you know, you can learn from them and they'll probably learn things from you. So definitely, I would say, think about your mindset, be conscious of it, but then also look for other resources that can help you, whether it's, you know, other groups of attorneys or coaching groups or, you know, anything, you know, other vendors that are there to help, any other resource that's going to help you, because you don't have to do it by yourself. And in fact, it'll go much faster if you don't. When I started my law firm, I had it for 10 years before I started that coaching group. And every day in that coaching group, all I could think about was, if I had done this, you know, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years sooner, how far along would I be, you know? But we don't think about that at the beginning necessarily. Those are the things that you think about later. So yeah, I think mindset and asking for help are two very important things when it comes to building any business, frankly, but particularly law firms.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, you spoke a little bit to, okay, we talked about using the software to its full potential, right? And, you know, we do accounting. We're familiar with accounting softwares. We're familiar with Clio and how it communicates, and we work in both. And, you know, I always say, and anybody who deals with data, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so if you're not tracking all of the relevant information, and it's important for it to be relevant, because if it's irrelevant, you're wasting your time and resources into tracking it, right? So identifying the relevant information and making sure that you're comprehensive with your data entry so that what it spits out on the back end is actually useful. And, you know, so you mentioned, like, one of the first steps when you start working with people is, okay, let's take a step back and let's establish what you're trying to accomplish. Like, what are you really trying to accomplish here? And, you know, we kind of do the same thing. We reverse engineer the numbers when we work with people. It's like, what do you want to make? How many hours do you want to invest? Let's start with that. Let's work backward, figure out what your top line needs to be, what that means for expenses. So speak to that, if you would, in terms of even maybe when they're looking at choosing a software, like evaluating, okay, what exactly am I trying to accomplish here?
Sure, absolutely. So the number one rule that I tell people all the time is, there is no perfect software. Like, if that's what you're looking for, you will be sorely disappointed. And you will spend a ton of time and energy trying to put things together that may or may not work together, and it's going to quickly become overwhelming. So my first piece of advice is, make a list of your priorities. You know, like, what's important to you? Do you want to be able to, you know, create templated documents? Do you want to be able to communicate via text with your clients? Do you want to be able to, like, what is important for you in running your practice and the way that you want to handle things? And once you have that list, then it makes it much easier to go through many, many options to figure out if they match up with that. But it'll be a lot easier because now you can rule things out pretty quickly, you know? So I think that definitely starting at the beginning or taking a step back to look at what you're trying to accomplish is so critical, not just with software or business building, but a lot of things, particularly with software. So once you have those priorities, then you can take a look and, you know, if your current software does those things, I mean, investigate it, figure it out first. Because if you have software that does those things already and you just didn't know or didn't realize, it's going to be so much easier to take a look at that first before you move on to another software. Because I can tell you, particularly with practice management software, it is never fun to switch. Like, I don't care what software you're going to or coming from, it's not fun. And sometimes, yes, it's worth it, and sometimes it's not. But until, you know, if you have something already, let's look at that first. Make sure that it's not going to be able to do what you want or can't accomplish what you want before you leave and try and find something else. What I see a lot of times is attorneys will feel a pain point, and it'll be pretty urgent, feeling pretty urgent to them. And so they'll go out and just buy another solution and start trying to use it. Where, the reality is they already had the solution. They just didn't realize it. Maybe it wasn't marketed that way, or maybe they didn't, notice or realize. So before you go and just throw more money at the problem, let's take a look and analyze, what's the more efficient or better way to handle that. And sometimes it is buying a new software. I mean, I'm not saying it's never new software, but I feel like people jump to that a lot quicker than maybe is necessary.
You're right. And it's funny. So we see it on the back end. So part of our process in determining a budget or a cash management strategy is going through every single line item on the financials. And there are certain hot spots that we look at, and we know we're going to find stuff, some fat that can be trimmed. And so often it is in the software. That's one of our hot spots. It's like, well, what's this? What's this? Are you using it? No. All right, well, let's shut that off. And does this do that? And, and using the resources that are already available to them. So I just find that funny.
It's true. And particularly now that more and more of the software is becoming, a monthly subscription-based kind of thing, it's like you go a couple months and now you just spent a fair amount of money on something you're not even using. So definitely it's a great idea to reevaluate that software I tell people on a quarterly basis, like, did we use it for the last 3 months? If we didn't, why not? Like, is it not serving us anymore? Then we're done. So yeah, it's definitely a great idea to reevaluate that regularly.
I think it would be interesting to do a study of how many dollars go unutilized in software every year. That would be interesting. Okay. So what might be relevant that lawyers may not know? So we talked about, take a step back, establish what it is that you want to accomplish. Is there something maybe that lawyers don't know they need that maybe they do? Like, for example, we work a lot in Clio, and a lot of times when we come into the picture, law firms are not utilizing the practice management tracker. The practice area tracker in Clio. So they're not tracking their matters by practice area. And one of the things that we really push is evaluate your profitability per practice area and look at those reports. And it's just a matter of they just didn't know to look for that. So what are you seeing that lawyers may be overlooking simply because they just don't know to look for those things?
So here's what I see a lot of is you'll meet an attorney or a law firm with practice management software, and then you'll start talking to them about the practice and how they do things and all that. And I'll find out that they have an Excel spreadsheet where they're tracking all of their cases. And maybe this Excel spreadsheet shows what stage of the case it's in, when it was opened, what's the next court date, that kind of very pertinent information, which is really helpful and oftentimes very helpful to see across all your cases at one time. So they create these, in some cases, elaborate spreadsheets to be able to track the different cases that they have. And then I ask them, well, are all these cases in your practice management software? Oh yeah, that absolutely, because we do our billing from there. So they all have to be in there, and there's a case, every case is in there. And so it very often is the case that they just don't understand or realize how to track all that same information in the software. So particularly if we're talking about Clio, Clio has a great screen called Matters where you can see all your cases listed out. And depending on what you're trying to track, you can show all that stuff on that screen in a custom field. So for example, if I want to know what stage of the case all of my cases are in, maybe I'm doing litigation and I've got, a demand phase, I've got a negotiation phase, I've got a complaint phase, I've got a trial phase, I've got a post-trial phase, all the different steps that this case is going to take. And I've gone through each case and I've decided, this is the step that it's in. We can create that in a custom field and we can display that on that matter list. And so essentially it becomes a custom report, or it becomes that Excel spreadsheet that they were trying to recreate. And it can all be done right there in Clio. And we don't have to worry about having a separate document saved somewhere else that multiple people are trying to access and edit. And it can get very complex very fast. And so, what'll happen is a lot of times people will lock down these spreadsheets, or only one person's allowed to change them or something like that to prevent, things accidentally disappearing and being misplaced. Whereas if we went and translated that all into a Clio custom fields, it would be a lot easier in my mind to be able to just go down the list of cases in Clio and see all that same data that was helpful to you. And so I feel like a lot of people, like you said, are buying practice management software, but they're not always using it to actually manage their practice or track their cases. And I think that's unfortunate, because that is what it's built for, even though it may not always be obvious, or it may not always be easy to figure out or to set up. And so, yeah, I think what they don't know is that they're creating unnecessary and duplicative, in many cases, work by having this separate spreadsheet where they're trying to track their cases.
Yeah. That's something that we talk about too, is duplicating work and taking, because we say kind of what you said, meet them where they're at. Let's see what they're already using. There's no need to, rebuild the wheel if it's working and you have functional systems in place.
Sure.
So, and I'm curious, so what would you tell someone? Because, people get to this point where they're no longer happy with the software. And like you said, it's not easy to switch, takes a lot of time, probably a lot of money. What is that threshold? Where is it? Because you said, there's no perfect software. So, where would you say, when is it time to switch? And when is it appropriate to kind of just work with what you have and find a way around it?
Sure. Well, and I think it's going to depend on how much is it costing you in both time and money to be able to, or to not have that feature available. So whether it's, let's say we're trying to text our clients and our practice management software doesn't work with texting. Okay, so every time I want to text, we have to go to this other software and copy the address or the phone number, put it in there, type out the message, whatever. So the question is, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, how long is that taking you? Are you, do you have one person who's spending like 3 hours a day texting people just because there's no way to integrate the two? That's a pretty big investment, and how much is the other software costing you, and, all kinds of things to look at. But I think that that's one of the reasons that I am really enjoying practice management software that integrates with other software, because you don't feel quite so stuck in that software. Because even if there's a feature that they don't have that you want to take advantage of, maybe there's an integration, maybe you can still use it with another program. So I feel like depending on the software that you're using, Clio integrates with almost 200 other pieces of software. And so chances are, if there's something Clio can't do, there's probably an integration that can help you with that. And some of the integrations are stronger and some of them are not. But the reality is that if there is an opportunity to integrate the two softwares, that's still going to save you time and energy and money in doing that. So definitely, I would say, if you're if you're looking to purchase practice management software, or if you're looking to switch practice management software, I would definitely take a look at how they integrate with other programs, because the reality is, like we talked about before, there isn't a software that does everything. And so there will probably come a time when you want to do something the software can't. And a lot of times it will be easier to integrate with something else as opposed to switch the entire software just for that one feature. So definitely, I'd say look at integrations. It can be a great benefit in order to keep you from having to absolutely switch everything that you have going on, because a lot of other things might be working, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, especially in the world of Zapier.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Zapier. Yeah, and for those of you that haven't heard of Zapier, basically it's a program that helps other apps work together. So it can help my Clio talk to my Gmail, and have things triggered off and actions happen based on that. So it's a great program. And I think that, anytime we can make two software work together and well, then I think that it's probably going to be a benefit to us. And of course, there are times where you'll get to a point where you're like, I'm working with so many other software, this practice management just isn't serving me anymore, then that makes sense. Maybe it's time to switch or look for something else. But I think that a lot of times people jump to something else, that, as we talked about earlier, just quickly before really doing that analysis of whether or not it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. And you explained it well, because basically what you said, from what I'm hearing is you have to do a time versus money analysis. Is the
Oh
time that
yeah.
you're spending working around this software
Mhm.
worth the money, or is it justifying one another? Is it worth the time and the money to work around your software needs, or is it more efficient with your time and money to then make the switch in terms of, we were
Absolutely.
talking about making the decision? And I think that plays into a lot into, we kind of touched a little bit on the business side of law. So not the actual practicing of law, but the business side of law,
Sure.
which is something that, we're lawyers are not graduating with this knowledge. It's not something that is super available in colleges or being taught in schools, is this kind of financial and business literacy. And, it's preaching to the choir with me because, we're on the same page as far as that goes. And so I think, like you said, a lot of it is mindset, and some of it is just knowing how to understand business and making decisions based on the time and money goals. And, that's why, when we work with people, we reverse engineer their time and money goals. And so
Mhm.
it baffles me sometimes how people have these time and money goals, but they're not tracking them to make sure they're on the right pace. And I heard once that entrepreneurs are the only people that'll leave a 40-hour a week work to or job to go work 70 hours a week for themselves.
Yep, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's sometimes you can, as a law firm owner, it can feel a bit overwhelming to think of, well, how am I going to track all this data? Like, how am I going to keep track of it? It's just another spreadsheet, like I can't do another spreadsheet. And I feel like it can be scary, but once you actually start doing it, and start small, like just track one thing. Like with my law firm, I was tracking, how long did it take for us to get from, I did residential real estate, so how long did it take from us to get from the contract being signed to closing? That was it. That's all I tracked for like 6 months. That's all I tracked. And so, take it one piece of information at a time and start adding these things to your toolbox, and you'll come to realize, a couple of years will go by, and it it's not that long, maybe 2.5 years go by, and now you've got all this data, and now you can really start to analyze things. But if you're thinking, sitting here right now, oh, well, I can't get all this data out of my software, I don't know all these numbers. Yeah, you probably don't, but start now. Like, start one or two pieces of information, get that into your toolbox, and start getting used to collecting that. And pretty soon you'll start thinking of other things, and you'll say, well, that would be nice to know this. Let's start tracking this. And next thing you know, you've got this, bunch of data. Now, obviously, it will go a lot faster if you have a higher volume practice. And it will take a little longer if your cases take 2-3 years, but you can also go back, by the way, and look at past cases, right? So you have the information on past cases. The question is just, is it worth it to hire someone to sort through and collect all that data,
Right.
in order for help you make those decisions? And again, that's going to be an individual decision whether it is or isn't, depending on how long it's going to take them to get all the data, how much is it going to cost you to hire that person, that kind of stuff. But a lot of times we'll have past data that we can go back and look at. When I was in that coaching group and I looked at my revenue for my law firm, I went back the whole 10 years. I was like, I've got 10 years of data. Let me go look, because that's going to tell me, very clearly what's going on here. And I did. I found trends that I had never looked at before or paid attention to before. And it was very eye-opening. So I would say absolutely that data is going to help you. It's just a question of, is it worth it to go back and sort through and dig out the old data, or just start now, or do a combination of the two? But I think that a lot of times we just get overwhelmed, and it's a little bit of paralysis, analysis paralysis, where we're like, well, wait, what should I do? Should I go back? Should I look forward? Should I do both? Like, it doesn't really matter. Just start. Like, start collecting something, and that'll end up being helpful. So, yeah, I think a lot of times it's kind of that perfectionist in us sometimes, where we're like, well, I don't have a year's worth of data, or I don't have, I have data on only 50% of my cases. Well, that's better than no data, So I think that by just starting that process, you're going to get some benefit from it, and which is more than you'll get if you just don't start.
Yeah. And you make a good point. When we think about, making changes or tracking stuff and we see it as this overwhelming feat, it's normally because we are thinking like we need to make this giant leap, this
Mhm.
huge change, this huge
Right.
step, and just an overhaul of everything. And really what it boils down to, and I experienced this with my marketing personally. When they told me I had to market, I looked at marketing as a whole and I was like, whoa, I don't want to do any of this,
That's a lot of
so
work.
overwhelming. And I got the same advice, and the advice to me was just do one thing, just
Mhm.
focus on one platform and
Right.
develop it over time. And as you get more comfortable, then you can step out a little further and then step out a little further. And so, I think it's the mindset. We psych ourselves out thinking, oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
God, we need to hit a home run, when it's really about just hitting singles.
It absolutely is those little steps that actually make the biggest difference. And I remember when I was little, like 6, 7, 8, whatever, and my mom would come in and say, you need to clean your room. And I was like, oh my God, the whole room? It's a mess. Like, this is so overwhelming. And so she got to the point where she'd come in and say, I need you just to pick up your puzzles. I need you just to come in and pick up your stuffed animals.
Smart
And
mom.
so I still think of that to this day when I'm looking at my business, and I think, I have to do this marketing and I have to do this because I fall into the same trap too sometimes. And so every time I have to remember that, and I think, okay, I'm just going to put away my puzzles. I'm just going to do one Facebook Live video today. That's it. That's it. Like, that's the marketing for today, right? So it's those little steps, whether we're talking about marketing or talking about, getting client work done or whatever we're talking about, the little steps really do add up. And if you psych yourself up thinking about the big results, then that can be very difficult to overcome and actually accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Yep, yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And all of this, in terms of software and processes, I don't know if you watch The Prophet, I think it's MSNBC. He says that people don't buy businesses, they buy processes.
That's so true. Yeah.
And
And I know that from having sold my own business. I mean, when you look at your firm and you think of what's of value here, what am I going to sell? I'm going to sell my client relationships. Well, you can try that. Absolutely. But guess what? They're people. And so sometimes people might just decide to do something different and you can't really control that. So client relationships are a good thing to try to sell, but they're not as, they're not as solid of a foundation as your business processes, as your marketing processes, as your procedures for filing a complaint, as all that kind of stuff of how you do what you do. That's really, I think, where the value is. And definitely something to consider for the future. Even if you don't think you're going to sell your law firm, I mean, you never know. Things change. Like, a lifetime's long. you,
right.
you may never have to sell it, but to have those resources as far as written procedures and written policies, I think are very, very priceless. Yeah.
And even if you want to take a vacation away from the office and have it still be standing when you get
Oh
back,
yeah,
you have to
absolutely.
rely on those processes and procedures. And, we see it all the time when businesses go to sell, law business or like any other business.
Yeah.
If the numbers aren't, there and the processes aren't there to support it, it shows. It
Mhm.
shows. When you have someone that has an entire packet that goes with the selling of their firm, as opposed to someone who has a few tax returns you can take a look at and ask questions, there's a
Right.
dollar value that goes
Oh
with
yeah.
that. People will pay more because they see you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed and you got a tick for every tack and you've done it all, and you can go on vacation for 6 weeks and the office runs
Yeah.
just fine with or without you, because it's no longer dependent on you, the person. It's now dependent on the processes.
And really what you're capturing is that institutional knowledge, right? You're capturing what everybody knows that they do. I get this all the time. People say, oh, well, we don't have any procedures, but Karen's been here 30 years. She knows exactly what to do. And I'm like, that's awesome. But I've talked to law firms where that key employee, you know, usually not for any bad reason, but maybe she has a heart attack or she gets hit by a bus, or I mean, things happen. And so now we're at the mercy of her knowledge as opposed to, those written policies and procedures. So I definitely think it's so critical to make sure that you're paying attention to that kind of stuff and that you're documenting those things, whether it's, on a piece of paper or on a computer file or wherever, because that's just going to be a hassle. I mean, more than a hassle, that can cripple your business if someone like that was to leave for unexpectedly. Like, I'm not even talking about, she's going to decide to get a job somewhere else. No, maybe she's loyal, the loyalist employee you've ever had. But if something happens to her that she's not expecting, that's going to be a huge detriment to your business. So absolutely, I think that's very, very critical.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. So, that being said, as we come to the end of our discussion, in your expert opinion, from what you've seen and how you've worked with law firms, what are some software recommendations that you can make, not only for maybe even practice management, for maybe task management,
Sure.
keeping track of processes and procedures? What are some of the key softwares, whether it be type or actual name of software, that you would recommend lawyers have as like their core software functions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think practice management is critical. I think that people underestimate how much it can help them and how much it can reduce their stress, frankly, in having that software. So I'm a big fan of Clio. I think that it's a fantastic software. It's not perfect, just like we talked about. There is no perfect software, but I do think that it has the most ability to integrate with other softwares, and it also has fantastic customer service. So those are kind of the two biggest selling points for me on that software. I also think that for those of you that are not accepting credit card payments yet for their attorney's fees, that's definitely something that is a very wise decision. LawPay is a fantastic resource for that. Other people are more concerned about pricing and maybe they can find better pricing somewhere else, so they use other credit card processing. That's fine. I think one of the benefits of using LawPay or any software really or any credit card processing that integrates with your practice management software, billing software, is really nice because, like you talked about, if we can eliminate a lot of that duplicate data entry, that's going to really save us time and energy. So if you're looking at, do I pay the little bit more of a fee to have the software that integrates, or do I just keep them separate and hire someone to do the double data entry? Do the math. I mean, you know how much you're paying that person. How long does it take them? And is it worth it? Or should you just pay the little bit more of the fee to have that integration? So those are two things that I would highly, highly recommend that you take a look at if you're not already. I think one of the most underutilized feature in practice management software that I see is the task management. They all come with task management features. And yes, they're not all as robust or as strong as some of the Asanas or other software that is dedicated to task management. However, I think there is a benefit in having it all in one place and being able to connect it with your different data that you have on your cases. So when I can quickly go from a task to a calendar event to a time entry within my practice management software, there's a lot of benefit to that as opposed to having to look in 3 different places and record things in 3 different areas. So definitely, I think my overwhelming plea to people is just take a look at the software you already have and really do a good analysis of what it can do. Because if you're not utilizing it, then you're really wasting your money. Just get rid of it. Like, why are you bothering? And if you are utilizing it, that's awesome. Maybe there's some more features that you can take advantage of in that same way. But yeah, I think that practice management software, collecting fees with credit card, those are like 2 very critical things. And then I'd start taking a look at communicating with your clients. What type of clientele do you cater to? Do they appreciate, or are they easy to connect with via text messaging? Are they, using the client portal that you share documents with? There's a lot of different apps and opportunities for you to communicate with your clients using that kind of technology. And so take a look at your ideal clientele. What's going to serve them best? Not what's going to serve you best. I mean, we're a service industry. We need to start looking at things from our client's perspective. What's going to make them want to interact with us and want to be very responsive to us? And if we have a portal that no one goes to, but they're on their cell phones all day texting their family and friends, then maybe we want to look at text messaging, and vice versa, So I think it's really an opportunity for us to look at our services from the client perspective and see what's going to serve them, because that's in the end what's really going to help those clients keep coming to you and keep referring you to other people, is that great experience that you can offer them. And if you're having to have them use technology that they're not used to or they don't really want to, then that's really not going to serve them in the end. So those are the three main things that I would take a look at.
I love that you speak to that, because you are familiar with Clio, so you've probably gone through and saw their 2019 legal trends report. So
Absolutely.
I made 2 videos on this report. One was a quick overview of the stats focusing on responsiveness in law firms. Less than 7% of law firms are what they would qualify as great responders to prospects. And then the second one I did is why the client experience matters, what it means, like appealing to all of the senses and creating this, if you're familiar with the Disney experience, an experience for your clients. And so I think it is just so powerful that you even speak to that, because, and I think it was, and I'm calling this off the top of my head, so nobody call me out on this, I think it was 87% of lawyers would call themselves responsive. But when Clio ran their trial, less than 9% with email and calls combined actually stood up to the standards of what responsive is. So we haven't, lawyers have in their mind that they are being responsive and doing this, but that's not what the clients are saying.
Exactly. So clearly there's a miscommunication here, right? If the attorney thinks they're communicating great and the client says, no, they're not communicating great, that's just by definition bad communication. Like that can't even work. So absolutely, I think that's true. And I think that what kills me is I want to see those statistics along with how much those same attorneys are spending on marketing. Because I often hear attorneys that say, well, I'm spending all this money on Avo or, whatever lead sourcing thing there is out there on the internet. And it's not paying off and I'm not getting the clientele. And, those same people we look at, well, what's your responsiveness rate?
Or
In fact,
you getting them?
Yeah,
And you're
Avo did
just
that
not,
a number of years ago. Yeah. And it's like, well, there's a disconnect there, right? Like you're getting the leads, you're spending the money on all these leads, but they're not converting. That there's a problem there, and that's a red flag. So I definitely think that that's the kind of perspective we need to have as a service industry. Is we need to look at what's keeping these clients coming or not coming, and how are we going to address that? How are we going to handle that for ourselves and for our business? So yeah, it was fascinating. I agree.
Yes. And I think that just based off of those numbers, if a firm can take a client experience and capitalize on it and put the systems and processes in place, it's almost an unfair advantage for them to have this. And, when I niched in the legal industry, because, I'm from the accounting industry, but there are so many parallels between the accounting industry and the legal industry. It's insane. One of them is lack of communication. That's what people were most unhappy with when it comes to their accounting services. So what did we do? We put processes and systems in place to be proactively checking in and meeting with our clients, not reactively sitting back waiting. And, if you don't schedule an appointment, well, what do you want me to do? You didn't schedule the appointment. We're in their inbox every week until they schedule an appointment. Like, hey, we got to look at your numbers. I know you hate accounting. It's boring, but it's relevant.
Right. No, and you're absolutely right. I tell my clients that all the time, that we want to take the firm from being more reactive, because there are a lot of reactive firms out there, and put them in more of a proactive situation. Because it is so, just knowing from having run my own law firm, I was reactive at one point. And when I was able to make that switch to being more proactive, it changed not only the way I practice law, but it changed my life, really. It changes the way that you look at your firm, how you handle your firm, how you handle your clients, and in turn, how you're able to show up at home and at work. Yeah. And so absolutely, being able to take your firm from being less reactive and more proactive is, for me, it was life-changing, and I'm hopeful to be able to share that with others and have others experience that as well.
Yes, well said. So thank you so much for all of this information that you shared. I think it's definitely a really important and often overlooked topic. So we appreciate your time coming today. If anybody wants to get a hold of you and talk to you about what it is you do, or ask any questions about, the video today, how can they reach out to you? Where can they find you?
Absolutely. So our contact information is on the internet at streamlined.legal. And find us there. You can book an appointment there to talk with us. You can send us an email. You can do whatever the easiest way is for you to reach out. That's what we want you to do. So absolutely, we're thrilled to talk about. And these are things that I'm passionate about. And I've put together a whole team to be able to kind of push this message out there and to be able to help attorneys in this way. So we're excited to talk to you. And thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. It's always great joy to find people and organizations that are trying to accomplish the same thing, you through financial controls, me through creating systems within a law firm. It's all trying to get to the same goal, and that is to help attorneys be successful. And whether that's financially successful or being able to take time off successful, whatever your definition of successful is, that's what we're trying to help you achieve.
Yes, absolutely. And there you have it, guys. Once again, we have done it. We're bringing you the professionals. We're bringing you the golden nuggets. All you got to do is grasp on and trust people who know what they're talking about. So thank you for tuning in. I hope it's been helpful, and we'll see y'all next time. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.